How much can a bad credit score really cost you? What free tools can you use to better understand your credit score? And is the American dream really broken? We'll answer these questions and more on this, the 17th episode of the DoughRoller Podcast.
Welcome to the DoughRoller Podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. Welcome to day 10 of the 31-day money challenge. Yesterday, I answered questions submitted by listeners. And remember, you can send me your questions via email at dr@doughroller.net. Or you can leave me a voicemail message. Just go to speakpipe.com/DoughRoller. You can leave your first name and a question or comment. Now, today we're going to be turning to credit scores. And I'm going to cover three basic questions about credit. One, how important is your credit score? Two, how are credit scores calculated? And then three, how you can monitor your score for free. And then tomorrow, we're going to have on the show Maxine Sweet, who is the credit expert at Experian, one of the three major credit bureaus. And so kind of a 1-2 punch here. In 2 days, we're going to knock out credit scores. In some ways, I almost hate to have to talk about credit scores. With all the things in the world, all the things going on in our lives, it's like one more thing we have to worry about. And I can remember back in the day when we didn't worry about credit scores because we didn't know what they were. We didn't know what they were when my wife and I bought our first home in 1993. There was no way to access your credit score like there is today. I had no idea what my credit score was. We just applied for the loan. But today, things, I guess, have changed. And the reality is your credit score can have a huge impact on your finances. So we'll cover credit scores today and tomorrow. The other thing we're going to do today, a little bit different than in past podcasts, I'm going to answer a reader question and I'm going to cover a news item. And I'm kind of experimenting a bit with this approach, but I'm thinking that rather than holding reader questions and perhaps having an entire show just on Q&As, I'm going to answer a reader question on, if not every episode, almost every episode of the podcast. And then if there's a news item that I think is interesting, I'm gonna cover that at the beginning of each show as well. And today we have one of each, so we'll do that at the start of the show before we turn to credit scores. Before we do all of that, though, quick shout out to our sponsors. Personal Capital is a free online tool that allows you to aggregate all of your investments into one place. You can see their performance very easily. You can look at your asset allocation across all of your accounts, retirement and non-retirement. You can also see how much your investments are costing you. You can check it out at personalcapital.com. And our second sponsor for this 31-day money challenge is Betterment. Betterment's an online platform that invest your money for you. You just pick the percentage of stocks and the percentage of bonds that you want, and Betterment does the rest, investing your funds in a series of low-cost ETFs. They rebalance your investments for you, and they also automatically reinvest your dividends. You can check out Betterment at betterment.com. So our reader question today and actually the news item go hand in hand. Let me start with the reader question. It comes from Julianne. She writes, "So blessed I found your site. Love the podcasts. Short, concise, and so educational. What about single income households, limited money coming in? Can we still put these and other tips in place?" What a great question. And it really kind of underscores a challenge for me as I write from the blog DoughRoller and I produce these podcasts. So many people reading and listening come from varying backgrounds and varying financial situations. I mean, some folks are just starting out, while others are in the middle of retirement. Some are perhaps making a modest income, while others are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. And so, we each have different struggles. We're each in different situations. And so, how do you create podcasts and blog posts and whatnot that can help a wide range of people? And I try to do that a couple of ways. One is by obviously covering a lot of different topics. So everything from investing to mortgages to debt to budgeting. And but really at the heart of Julianne's question, I think is this: the basic principles of personal finance and investing do not change based on your income. The way in which someone should invest their money, in my view, is the same whether you make $25,000 a year or $250,000 a year. whether you should budget is the same regardless of how much you make. I mean, some might think, well, golly, if I made $250,000 a year, I don't need to budget. I don't agree with that. I think everyone needs to spend their money consciously. And the only way you can do that is in some form of budgeting. If you've listened to the budgeting podcast and the 31-Day Money Challenge, my belief that there is no one right way to budget. There are a lot of different ways, and they can be effective for you. But regardless of your income, you should know where your money is going. Even today's podcast about credit scores, credit scores don't depend on income. Someone making $25,000 a year can have a higher credit score than someone making $250,000 a year. So in answer to Julianne's question, yes, I think and I hope that the tips and resources that I mentioned in this podcast and on my blog can help you regardless of where you are with your finances. And that kind of dovetails into the news item I want to talk about today before we get to credit scores. And it's an article I saw on CNN. It's written by an Emily Jane Fox. And it's the title of the article is Millennials Turn Up Heat Against Low Wages. And there's a picture of folks protesting low wages. They are, I guess they make minimum wage at fast food restaurants. And so if you follow the news on this item, this issue, you know that there have been a lot of protests. But what caught my attention was actually the first two sentences of the article where the reporter writes the following. Stuck in low-wage or part-time jobs with mountains of student loans to pay off, the generation that came of age in the new millennium finds itself in a hopeless situation. Despite being better educated than previous generations, many young people are shut out of the middle class with no roadmap of how to get there. And I started thinking about that. Well, it's one thing to feel stuck, and it's one thing to feel hopeless. But do you really believe you are? I mean, I think just about all of us at one time or another have felt hopeless and stuck in some situation, whether it's trying to improve your job and your income or saving an emergency fund or buying your first home or maxing out your 401k or heck, just even saving it all for your retirement. We may have felt stuck and hopeless in other situations beyond finance too, whether it's in relation to our health or perhaps relationships. It's one thing to feel stuck or hopeless, though, and it's another thing to truly believe that you are. And I think this is more than just a semantic difference. It really matters because if you really believe you're stuck and hopeless, I think you'll act one way. And if you say, well, no, I may feel stuck or hopeless, but I know deep down I'm not, I think you'll behave a different way. And when I think about this article, just the fact that these folks are protesting tells me that while they may feel stuck and hopeless, and they may be frustrated and even angry, I think they don't really believe that they are. Otherwise, why protest? If your situation is hopeless, what's the point of protesting? I think they're protesting because they think it'll help their situation. Now, my point here isn't about minimum wage and the debate there and whether it should be raised or not. It goes much further than that. It's about our own attitudes towards our situation. And I think if we can see ourselves as able to improve our situation, if we may feel hopeless, but if we don't actually believe we're hopeless, I think it will motivate us to start asking questions. What can I do to improve my situation? Do I need to improve my education and my training? I'm going to spend more time looking for a better job, even if it takes me weeks or months. I'm not going to give up. You'll take that attitude if you don't truly believe you're hopeless or your situation's hopeless. But if you do believe that, well, then why bother? And it actually brought to my memory another article by this same reporter. It's back in, and I'll leave links to both of these articles in the show notes. This was back in December, and it was an article entitled, I Work 4 Jobs and I'm Still Struggling. It's about a young man named Bobby Bingham. He has a college education, and I think from the article, I think he's single. He shares an apartment with a roommate, and it says he barely gets by. And not unlike the article about the millennials turn up heat against low wages, this article starts out in a similar vein. Bingham is 37 years old and has a college degree, but like many Americans, is stuck working many hours in low-wage part-time jobs. And when I read that, I thought, well, does he really think he's stuck? He's no doubt frustrated, but he's got a college degree. He's 37. Does he really believe he's stuck? And as I read through the article and I got to the very end of it, he's quoted and he says this: the only choice only choice I have is to go into work and do this, he said, looking around and seeing all these other people I work with. They don't see any other choices either. Well, I guess he really does view himself as stuck. I mean, the quote is, it's his only choice. And if that's what he truly believes, then he's going to keep doing the same thing. And so I guess the question for you today is, how do you view your situation? It may feel miserable, and it may feel hopeless, and you may feel stuck. But do you truly believe you are? And I hope the answer is no. I hope you, as difficult as the situation may be that you're going through right now, I hope you don't see yourself as truly stuck and truly hopeless. Because if you see yourself that way, it'll affect the choices you make and the things that you try to do to improve your situation. But if you don't see yourself as hopeless and stuck, you'll start looking for ways to improve your situation. And I think for many people, that makes all the difference. So that's my view on these news items. If you have a different view or just want to share your opinion, you can do so. Just go to speakpipe.com/DoughRoller. Leave your first name and let me know what you think. So as I mentioned, we're going to cover three basic questions today about credit scores. The first one is, how important really is your credit score? That's question one we're going to tackle. Then we're going to tackle how credit scores are calculated. And then finally, we're going to talk about some tools you can use to monitor your credit score for free. And so let's begin with the first question, how important is your credit score? And for me, by far the most important aspect of a credit score is when you apply for a mortgage, whether you're buying a new home or you're refinancing your existing mortgage. And I want to give you a sense of just how important a credit score is. My FICO, and I think for those that don't know, FICO is sort of the standard credit scoring formula that at least most creditors use. Not all creditors, but most creditors use. And the folks at FICO started a site called MyFICO that includes an excellent forum where you can get questions answered about credit and credit scores. And they have some interesting calculators. The one I'm looking at now is a loan savings calculator and I'll link to it in the show notes. But basically what you do is you pick the type of mortgage you want to get. I've selected 30-year fixed. And the amount of your loan, and I've put in $250,000. And what it does is it calculates what your monthly payment will be depending on what your FICO credit score is. Now, the top FICO score is 850. To qualify for a mortgage, you generally need a credit score of at least 620. So the way the calculator works is it breaks down, it's got, let's see here, 6 different FICO score ranges. For example, it goes from 620 to 639, and then from 640 to 659 and on up. The top range is from 760 to 850. And as your credit score moves up, the interest rate that you can qualify for goes down, right? And of course, as your interest rate goes down, your monthly payment goes down. The thing is the numbers get really big. So on a $250,000 mortgage, if you have a 620 FICO score, which would be the lowest you could have to qualify for a loan, at today's rates, you're going to pay, according to MyFICO, about 5.844%. And that'll give you a monthly payment, this is principal and interest, of $1,474. Now, if we move up to the top range, that's 760 and higher, your interest rate drops to 4.255, so that's about 1.5% drop. And your monthly payment goes down to $1,231, which is about I'm just trying to do the math here, about $240 a month savings. That's a lot of money. And remember, that's your monthly savings. So when you multiply that over a 30-year mortgage, the numbers get really big. And that's just the only difference is your credit score. And one of the things the calculator shows you is your total interest paid. And the numbers are really eye-opening. If you have the 620 credit score, your total interest paid on this mortgage over 30 years will be $280,602. Let me try that again. Your total interest paid will be $280,602. If you have the highest range in credit score, that is 760 or higher, total interest will be $193,009. So we're talking a difference of about $90,000 in interest over the life of the loan, all because of your credit score. Credit scores are really important. They have a big impact on your finances. Now, that's mortgages. You may be saying, "Well, I don't have a mortgage, or I don't want to buy a home," for example. Well, if you're going to rent an apartment or a home, most landlords and property management companies check your credit report. And in fact, I know folks who have been denied an apartment because they have bad credit. So credit will affect you even if you're renting. It also has other effects. We're going to be talking about getting out of debt, and one of the best ways to get out of debt, or the first step, is to reduce your interest rates. We've talked about that when we talked about the one and done method of saving money, which was podcast 13. Lowering your interest rates is an easy way to save money. If you have high interest credit card debt, the easiest way to do that is through balance transfer offers. But you can only get those if you have a good credit score. And in fact, and I'll leave a link in the show notes to this, but I'm looking at a list of 0% cards on a website called allcards.com. And one of the things this website does is it lists the average and lowest credit scores that were approved for each card. For example, I'm looking at the Citi Simplicity card on this page, which offers a 0% APR balance transfer for 18 months. The average credit score approved for this card was 720. The lowest credit score approved was 644. So, you need a reasonably good credit score to qualify for this and virtually all of the other 0% credit cards. So that's just another way your credit score matters. As I've mentioned in the past, it also can affect your car insurance premiums. The higher your score, the lower your premium. It can also affect your ability to get jobs in certain industries, and for example, in finance, or if your job requires a security clearance. So your credit score matters for a lot of different reasons. I think, again, its biggest impact is when you're going to get a mortgage, refinance a mortgage. But it has a significant impact well beyond that as well. And so, again, this is one of the reasons I'm spending 2 days in this 31-day money challenge talking about credit scores. Like it or not, they really matter. All right, now question 2 for today is how are credit scores calculated? And I want to reiterate something I said earlier, and that is that income doesn't matter, which is a surprise, I think, to a lot of people. But your income, not only is it not a factor in credit scoring formulas, but the credit reporting agencies don't know what your income is. Now, it can be an indirect factor if you, say, lose a job and you're out of work for a while, and as a result, you can't pay your credit cards or your mortgage or your car loan on time. That's going to, of course, hurt your credit score. But your actual income, whether you make, $25,000 or $50,000 a year, or maybe as much as $500,000 a year, doesn't directly affect your credit score. So if it's not based on income, what's it based on? And fortunately, the folks at FICO have given us a good bit of information on how the FICO formula works. You'll learn tomorrow with Maxine Sweet from Experian that there are different types of credit scores, but I think they generally follow these factors. And so what are they? There's 5 of them. There's your payment history. Do you pay your bills on time? Credit utilization of your revolving credit, like credit cards. How much of your credit limit have you used up? Are you almost maxed out on your cards? Or do you have a lot of available credit? That's a factor. What are called inquiries. That's when you apply for a new loan and the creditor, the lender, checks your credit report. That's known as an inquiry, and it can affect your score. The length of your credit history, how long you've had credit. And then the 5th factor is the types of credit that you have. Say, for example, revolving credit like a credit card versus installment loans like a car loan or a school loan. Those are the 5 factors. Now, the important thing to realize is that they're not all equal. Some of these factors weigh more heavily into your score than others. The most important factor is payment history. Do you pay your bills on time? That factor, according to FICO, accounts for about 35% of the score. It's the single most important factor that the FICO formula considers. And paying your debts on time is very important. A late payment, for example, even if you're just 1 month late, it stays on your credit report for 7 years. Now, the good news is it doesn't affect your credit the same over those 7 years. As a late payment gets older and older on your credit file, it hurts your score less and less, but it's still there for 7 years. Paying your bills on time is a must in order to have a good credit score. That's 35% of the overall score. The second most important factor, accounting for 30% of the formula, is credit utilization. And by and large, to have a good score, you want to try to keep your credit utilization at about 20% or lower. So, for example, if you had a $10,000 in available credit on your credit card, you'd want to keep your actual balance at $2,000 or less. Of course, the goal is to pay off your credit cards in full every month. But once you start to get above, say, 50% of your credit of your available credit that you've used, your credit score really starts to take a hit. And of course, if you're maxed out on your cards, that's going to have a significant effect on your credit score. Those two factors make up 65% of the formula. They are together by far the most important aspects of your credit file when it comes to calculating your score. Do you pay your bills on time, your debts on time, and what is your credit utilization for your revolving accounts? The other three, inquiries, length of credit history, and types of credit, account for between 10 and 15% each. They are, they're not insignificant, but, they're not the real drivers of your credit score. A lot of folks get focused on how applying for credit can affect your score. And, in extreme cases, if you're applying for lots and lots of credit cards all at once, it might have a bigger impact. And if you're ready to apply for a mortgage, or refinance, I would avoid applying for new credit because, as we looked at earlier in the show, even small changes in your credit score can have a big impact on your interest rate that you qualify for. But by and large, while these are certainly important to be mindful of, your inquiries, length of credit history, and the types of credit used are not the more significant drivers of your credit score. One thing that I would mention about length of credit, it's not just about how long you've had any credit. They also look at average time on file. So for all of your different accounts, what's the average time they've all been open? And that's something that was new to me. I learned that in my interview with Tom Quinn. He's the credit expert at FICO. And he came on the show for podcast number 2. And if you haven't listened to that podcast and you want to improve your score, you're getting ready for a mortgage, I highly recommend that you listen to that interview. And again, you can just find it by going to DoughRoller.net/podcast 2. That's a podcast followed by the number 2. And that will redirect you to that interview with Tom. I learned a lot in that interview, and I thought I knew a fair amount about credit scores, and Tom taught me a lot, as I guess you'd expect from the expert from FICO. So that is generally how your credit score is calculated, or I should say the factors that go into it. One thing I'd say, too, is that how things hurt your score will vary depending on your specific situation. So in other words, a late payment doesn't affect everybody the exact same way. If you have 35 years of credit history and you've had mortgages and credit cards and car loans and school loans and you've paid everything on time for a very long period of time, having a single 30-day late payment because maybe you just forgot to pay a credit card is not going to affect you the same way as it might someone who's brand new to credit. And the same thing is true with credit utilization, really all of the factors. So there's no hard and fast rule as to how each of these will affect everybody. It is very specific to each individual. But the takeaway for me on all of this, and we're going to talk more about improving your score tomorrow, but the two key elements are pay your bills on time and keep your credit utilization as low as possible. Now, the third question for today is how can you monitor your score? And there are a couple of ways, and I've kind of used all of these. The first thing I would say is you absolutely have to get your free credit report from annualcreditreport.com. You can get your report from each of the 3 credit bureaus for free each year from that website. Now, it doesn't give you your credit score, but it gives you a free copy of your credit report. And the importance for that is you can check for errors. And you want to do that, particularly if you're really focused on keeping your score up. Maybe you're going to apply for a mortgage or whatever. You really want to know what's on your credit report. It's free. I've gotten my report from annualcreditreport.com. You get it for free online. It just takes a couple of minutes. And that's the first thing. Now, in terms of actually getting your score and monitoring it, I would recommend 3 resources. The first is MyFICO. And by the way, I'll leave links to all of this in the show notes. MyFICO has what they call Score Watch, and it's one of those deals where you have to put in your credit card and you get a free 10-day trial, and then if you don't cancel, they start charging you a monthly fee, and that's important to know. And if you want to keep that credit monitoring service, that's fantastic. If you don't, then you'll want to cancel it before the 10-day period, and that's just something important to remember. But you do get your FICO score through that process, and then again can continue to monitor your score if you want to. The other two tools that I use, and I've talked about these in the past, Credit Sesame and Credit Karma. What I like about each of these is that you don't have to give them a credit card. They are free. And I sign up for both. Again, they're free. They're very informative. I'm looking at my Credit Sesame report now. It looks like my score is 793 according to Credit Sesame. And I can see the history of it. I can see how it moved up and down throughout 2013. And then really more importantly is you can dive down into the tools that they offer to see what's keeping your score up, what's helping your score, but also what's hurting your score. And that can be a big benefit when it comes to improving your score in advance of, again, maybe a mortgage or refinance. So again, that's Credit Sesame and Credit Karma. As I said, I use them both. I'll leave links to both. I found them both to be very, very helpful in understanding credit scores and, again, what can help your score and what can hurt your score. So I hope you found today's podcast helpful. As I said, tomorrow we're going to talk to the credit expert from Experian to get more information about credit scores and how to improve them, and just to get her perspective on credit reports and credit scores, just given how important they are to our finances. So that brings the show to a close. You can find the show notes where I'll include links to all the resources I mentioned today. Just go to DoughRoller.net/podcast 17. That's podcast followed by the number 17. You can leave a voicemail with a question or comment. Just go to speakpipe.com/DoughRoller. Leave your name and your question or comment. You can also email me, dr@DoughRoller.net. I read every email and respond to every email. You can subscribe to this podcast. Just go to DoughRoller.net/iTunes. You'll be redirected to the iTunes page where this podcast resides. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter. That's at DoughRoller.net/newsletter. It's a free newsletter I send out every Saturday, packed with resources and tips to help you make the most of your money. Until next time, remember, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.